Why do agencies let you down? Today we sit down with Maher of Cartology, and it's a really honest and frank conversation. There's some really good meat and potatoes here, and I think you're going to enjoy. Selling on Amazon is difficult. It's everything but passive income. I share videos like this one to help Amazon sellers on their journey. My name is Stephen Pope, and I'm the founder of My Amazon Guy. When Amazon turns your world upside down, tune into My Amazon Guy to land safely and grow your Amazon business. I'm now joined by Michael. Thanks for coming on the My Amazon Guy podcast.
Thank you for having me, Stephen. I genuinely appreciate that, man. Excited to chat.
So from an agency to agency standpoint, I saw your video on LinkedIn today, and I actually want to dive straight into the criticism that agencies get, because I think you're onto something. And I bite the hand that feeds me all the time. Like, I'm always criticizing Amazon. So let's take a moment and just criticize agencies, because I think a lot of our listeners probably have some past experiences that they've been burned with. So Michael, what are your thoughts? Like, why do agencies sometimes let down sellers?
Well, the easy answer is it's comprised of humans. So anything that has humans involved, there are always going to be letdowns. And I think the reason that agencies specifically, and I pick a lot of times on big agencies or big brands on Amazon and why they fail. And a lot of times it's because the smaller agencies, the smaller brands are more agile. They can move a lot quicker. But why do agencies fail? I honestly believe it's because they get this vision in their head of being this big, huge company, and they lose sight of two things. One is they lose sight of the people that are serving their clients, which are their employees, their team members, and they lose sight of what the clients are truly after. And it becomes about their ambition. And we want to be the biggest. We want to have, we want to serve 1,000 people. And there's nothing wrong with serving 1,000 people. There's nothing wrong with generating a lot of revenue. I want to generate revenue. I want to become profitable. So don't get me wrong on that. But when everything becomes about finding efficiency at scale, you forget relationships, you forget the actual work that you're doing, and you start overloading. I mean, one of the things I said in my post was you have account managers that are overloaded with 20 plus accounts that they're managing, and that is impossible, especially when it's one person. If you've got a team surrounding that person, it might be more manageable, but how much insight are you really giving those clients when your account manager is just up to the hilt in work?
So it's all about adding value, right? And so My Amazon Guy, my mantra is like, we grow sales. And as long as we're doing that, I think people will keep us on the payroll. But I've been bringing a ton of agencies on my podcast, and people, they ask, why would you do that? And, aren't you giving your business away? And not at all. Like we have really authentic conversations. We talk about these things, and it's not me against you. It's us against Amazon, right? Like we're in this together. So I appreciate you coming on. Normally when I bring somebody on, I'd be like, okay, tell us about yourself. What's your origin? But you were so ramped up on this topic, and I feel the same way, man. Like, I feel
that's
the same
easy,
way.
man. I can just start rattling stuff off and going like that. I mean, I think part of it is because we're both passionate about what we do, and I genuinely want to see people succeed. When people succeed, does it help my agency? Yes, it helps my agency. I appreciate that. I also want to live and be able to do fun things with my family, and my family to eat and stay in our house, all that good stuff. But I genuinely want to see people succeed, and that comes to the agency camaraderie as well. Things that you learn, Stephen, are lessons that I may not have encountered yet, but that can help me. And there's two reasons in my mind why we would have camaraderie. There's a lot of reasons why we wouldn't. But the two reasons we would is right now, I live in an abundance mentality, an abundance mindset, not a scarcity mindset. There will always be more than enough. I may not be doing all of the right things, but there will always be enough there. I just need to go out and find it. And sometimes you got to get a little creative. And the second thing is there's so many people that need help. And even with the number of agencies and service providers that are out there, it's not enough. So I'm even advocating and going out and talking on college campuses, I mean, virtually right now, but going to as many different events. And while I might be there talking about entrepreneurship or about Amazon, I want people to know, like, there are job opportunities here. This is a whole industry. This is a whole field. If people are now, teaching digital marketing and entrepreneurship at colleges, in 10 years, they might be teaching Amazon marketing or something like that. I mean, universities are notoriously behind. So
Seriously, like 10 years behind, seriously. Even, I don't know, even 5 or 6 years ago, I was in Oklahoma City. My boss at the time, Jean-Marc's Mentia, he was the VP of e-commerce at a company called Atmex, and he would go to the local colleges and just talk, you just go in and talk to the e-commerce degree shop. And then we'd interact with the talent pool, and honestly, like the basics that are just even being taught in college right now they're a decade behind. They're way, way behind. So
yeah.
I like where you're going with this, because we need to teach people that this is a career, right? So like
Yeah.
when we hire people at our agencies, for some people it's just a job, right? But
and that's okay. We sometimes just
nothing
need
wrong with that.
People. Yeah.
Yeah. So for some people, it's just a paycheck, but for those that want to make a career out of this, they literally could do this for the rest of their lives. Like, we encourage people at My Amazon Guy to go open your own Amazon account, like totally side hustle. Use some of our company resources to help you out. Your accounts, I've got one employee who's got an account suspended. We're trying to help him get it reinstated right now.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like sharing that community, like we're trying to build. So that's just something that I feel very passionate about. And I could tell based on seeing you speak, you also were passionate about this. Any thoughts on that last bit of any kind?
It only serves to help you and your business if someone on your team is running a brand and on Amazon. And here's why. Even people that come from Amazon and end up starting their own consultancy or their own agency or whatever it is that they're providing, they have inside experience and knowledge on how Amazon works. That alone does not guarantee you will know how to manage a brand successfully on Amazon. When you have done it before, being your own brand or someone else's brand, you have a whole new realm of experience, and you have a whole new bag to pick from. So some of the people on my team have run. That's how I got started. I started running my own brand. Some of the brands that I created worked, some didn't. Great lessons from all those. Some of them are still managing and running their own stores, and some have aspirations to become, brand owners. And I want to encourage all those people to do that, because it's only going to give you a better experience of the highs and the lows. And I think hopefully it builds a little bit more empathy into the lows aspect, so that when you're dealing with a client and they're taking things really personal, like, well, why is Amazon doing this? Why do they hate us? Blah, 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 blah.
Oh man,
in my mind,
that question often.
I mean, it kind of opens a can of worms. And as much as there is an us versus them mentality against Amazon, I also want to look at things from Amazon's perspective and say, okay, why would they be doing this? So why did they suspend people so willy-nilly a lot of times? And I know people like Ed Rosenberg from ASGTG.
God bless that guy, by the way.
He's incredible, and he is just so passionate about helping people, and we need people like that in that space, because I think each avenue of Amazon, just like accounting and marketing and finance, are all their own things. All those components roll up into an Amazon business. And so you can pick lanes within Amazon. You don't have to be an agency. You could be a company that does reimbursements. There are companies out there. For anyone that doesn't know, you probably do if you've been listening to My Amazon Guy for a while, but there are whole companies out there that are just going and finding reimbursements of cash that Amazon owes you from destroyed or mishandled inventory. And if you think that sounds crazy, it's not. There are millions and millions of dollars to be had there.
Shameless plug. We have a service for that called My Refund Guy. So
there you go. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, there you go. Like there is a whole field that's there, but everyone benefits when they know and understand, building a brand. But just quickly about my point about seeing things from Amazon's perspective, I say, why did they suspend people so quickly? Okay, well, they're seeing it as a customer experience issue. And as much as they might be unjustified, we feel like, in suspending someone, we know that they're playing by their rules. And so that's something to be aware of. The more we sit and say, oh man, why did they do that? Now there's a time for saying, hey, we need to take action so that they stop doing this. And that is something that Ed Rosenberg is doing, which I appreciate. He's got petitions and stuff out. to say, hey, like work with us, Amazon, get people's money back. He brings up some great points. Like if you're holding on to people's money, why aren't you refunding the buyers? If you think there's a complaint about counterfeit, why aren't you refunding the buyers? You're just holding on to someone's cash. So there's a lot more there. But when I look at it from Amazon's perspective, we can say not only have a little bit more understanding where they're coming from, but we can take our plans and our actions and then apply that towards what Amazon's thinking. Because a lot of people, when they get suspended, say, we didn't do anything wrong, unsuspend us. And that's not what Amazon responds to. They respond to, we take this very seriously. I mean, there's a ton of language.
Plan of action, the classic POA.
Yeah, there you go.
Michael, I mean, like, honestly, keep the vibe up. This is solid. Let's talk a little bit about who you are and whatnot briefly though, and then let's get back to your gusto, which I think you're on fire right now. So you're with Think Cartology.
It's actually Cartology. That's our URL is Think Cartology, but it's Cartology.
My bad. This is why I'm doing this.
All good.
All right. So tell us about Cartology.
Cartology really started 11 years ago when I became an e-commerce seller. I just hated the job I was at. And so I moved on. I said, I want to start an e-commerce business. I had some help from a friend. I did that for about 6 years, sold on eBay, Amazon, my own store. And the market really changed quickly in 2016. I mean, there's a lot more to unfold there, but really I just said, I need to pivot with these skill sets, the skill set that I have. And so I turned to being a service provider. Very quickly found that I went really general e-commerce, even though I had a lot of experience with Amazon, and just saw there was a ton of need there. So I just dove headfirst into that and just started very quickly, like within the first, 4 to 6 months of working on projects, I'm like, I'm gonna have to scale and there's no way I'm gonna do this alone. So I just started building and kind of figured it out from there. I'm a musician. I
see the guitar in the background. What do you play?
So my first instrument was drums. And then singing and playing piano. I played guitar for a little while, not for very long, but I picked it back up because of this guy right here. If you can't see, it's Prince. But I was watching him play throughout the pandemic, and I'm like, man, I just want to be able to get close to that. So I just said, I'm going to start practicing guitar again. So I picked it back up, and this is not like a showpiece. This is just where I practice guitar. So it happens to show up in my office. We're
in your natural setting. All right.
We're in my natural setting right now.
Cue the Crocodile Dundee music and whatnot. So all right. So you run a full service agency, and you've seen it all, because when you're a full service agency, you're not just running SEO, you're not just running PPC. You see everything, the catalog problems, the logistics issues. What have you learned from all of that? Loaded question.
I think I look at, I'm sure there's a ton of lessons, and I'm sure I could just honestly sit back and listen to what lessons you've learned. I can say, yep, learn that. Yep, learn that. Yep, learn that. Oh, I haven't heard that one, but I'm going to be watching out for it. I think the biggest thing, and this is going to sound so simple, but I feel like we tend to, as humans, overcomplicate things a lot. We like things being complex and us knowing more than other people. But the biggest thing that I learned, and that I think a lot of people have still do not understand, is looking at Amazon holistically. You can have an agency that focuses on, or a company that focuses on one specific thing, like refunds. And typically that is a service that can stand alone. It's not necessarily contingent. Like, you might continue to run into issues, and my refund guy won't be able to fix those issues for you because you're not making changes in how you're sending in inventory or whatever it might be, but you can still get the refunds. But when one thing is broken on Amazon loves to talk about the flywheel. If you've got a lever broken, if you've got a gear broken, that slows everything down. And if you don't look at things holistically, you may find some success, but you will not be around for the long term, because you will continue to not figure out why certain things aren't working. And other people will come along, learn it quicker, understand it, and will excel, which is why you see out of what Amazon says is $300 billion in sales, I believe it was in 2019, and 150 billion of that came from third-party sellers, why they're making majority of the money for Amazon. And when you look at SEC filings for 2019, Amazon reported, I believe it was just under 200, and I could be wrong. If I'm wrong on this, someone feel free to call me out, but 200 billion, like 193 billion were the sales for marketplace. So everything else was like AWS and ad sales and other stuff. So 150 out of like 200 billion is third party market sales. That's a big cut. And it's honestly, I believe it's because they're able to move faster. They're not the big giants that are like, hey, let's run this by our department head and then by our product manager and then by our VP and then by our
flashbacks, corporate flashbacks.
Just to shut it down PTSD. And then go back. Oh, they like this. I'm waving the white flag here.
Most of us getting into this Amazon game are trying to avoid that. And many of us have been through that corporate grind. So, all right. So that's a really good thought. I like that. And it is quite the grind trying to manage all of these components. So, I always love to talk about mistakes, because there's always a lesson to learn from that.
Yep.
So you can take this either of two directions you want. You could talk about a mistake that you've made as an agency, or you could talk about common Amazon mistakes. But what are some mistakes that you think you could talk about that people could learn from today?
Okay. I will be very transparent and say, there was a recent mistake that we made, and it was, we were bringing on a client, and we have taken a lot of time to build out our onboarding process. And that means actually taking on a client, collecting all the information, and then putting them into what we call the launch phase, which is regardless of whether your business is running on or still is existing on Amazon or not, you're launching with us. So there's a whole process, and that takes time. And a lot of people do not like going through that process, but it is necessary, because we're not just working for you for a couple of weeks. We're working for you for a minimum of 6 months, but often a year and a half, 2 years. And so we need to make sure we've got everything we can up front. And this is why knowing your clients or your customers are so important. Someone asked us for a timeline, and we gave them a timeline. They were apparently looking for a different timeline. They were looking for something that was,
I want everything fast, cheap, and the highest quality possible, Michael.
And I want to know exactly what's happening. And we made a mistake in that we did not give her the type of, I think what we needed to do is ask more questions and say, when you say timeline, what do you mean?
What are you looking for? Yeah.
Because like there was an expectation that was there with this client that we were aware of, an expectation. We didn't know to the detail that was there. And even though I believe there was, some fault on both sides, ultimately, I'm going to say it comes back on us because we didn't dig deeper and say, what do you mean by timeline? Because we gave, this is going to happen then, this is going to happen then, but we need you to do this first. And that's ultimately what led to the breakup of the relationship. And majority of the clients, we're holding on to clients for a fairly long time. And that's our goal. We want to build long-term relationships. We want to work with you for more than just 6 months. We have clients that the agency's like 4 years old. We have clients that are going on 2 years, some that are going on 3 years. And yes, we make mistakes. I made some early mistakes as a solo service provider. One time got in a very loud arguing match with a client who
boy.
Yeah. I mean, that was just my pride kicking in and me not wanting to be wrong. And I did something correct, but it also had some unexpected externalities to it that were not pleasant. And I could have totally handled the situation better. Those are just transparently some of the mistakes that I've made and that my agency has made. And we learn from each one of those. We say, okay, look, moving forward, just like when someone kind of screws us over on something, we're like, hey, new provision in the contract, let's put this in there.
I've been stiff too. That's the worst feeling. Theft.
And people's justification of that is very frustrating. But ultimately I say, well, we allowed this thing to happen, and so we need to fix that. Common Amazon mistakes.
I'm actually really glad you went the agency mistake route. It's very in line with this kind of thematic, like why agencies let you down kind of mantra. And so somebody's going to listen to this and be like, wow, Michael's just like revealing it all. Like, here's what's going on. And I've been in the consulting business a decade. Like it's always the consultant's fault, right? Like 100% of the time, that's like what we're paid to do. We're paid to cheerlead. We're paid to take the blame. And we're also like, hey, you got to grow my sales. Like it's all of us. But all right, so let's go to the second part then, because I think a lot of Amazon sellers will also appreciate hearing mistakes that they could, avoid as an Amazon seller. So what kind of intel you got here?
So just in that, our mistake as an agency was not understanding expectations. Honestly, the biggest mistake that clients make from our vantage point, and that I believe sellers make, is having incorrect expectations. And that comes from a place of lacking the education of what Amazon really is. So like, how do you contextualize that? Because I love talking theoreticals and philosophy and all that stuff, but how do you put things into place?
Practical advice is always the best. Hit me.
So the thing that oftentimes needs to be fixed is there's an underestimation of how Amazon will work with your business, both and then there's an overestimation piece. So the overestimation piece is just what you said. We want the best product as cheap as possible, and we want it to grow super quickly.
Which, by the way, you can only pick two of those three, right? So
okay,
so it's like a Venn diagram. Pick two of three: speed, quality, and cost. And whenever I was at the corporations, going back to the PTSD here, I would always have these conversations with CEOs, and I'd be like, "Look, you got to pick two or three," and they hated that conversation. Yeah. They would like, get out of my office.
I want all of them.
I demand,
if you're in a leadership position
where perfection.
You want, then that's a recipe for disaster.
But so this is a common mantra though that we all fall into. So you did a good job setting this up. What mistake is made?
The overestimation piece is Amazon's going to work really quickly for us in our favor. And while it works quicker than in a traditional retail setting, it still takes time. When you get onto the marketplace, and if you want to see the growth numbers that I know you want to see your business go from $10,000 a month to $50,000 to $100,000. It requires either significant capital in the beginning, which 90% of the people that want that growth do not have. And that's why, honestly, we don't end up working with a ton of people. It's not because we're so secret and exclusive. It's just, we have to work with the people that we know are going to be successful from a mindset standpoint, because the way that we look at cost for our services, there's a percent of revenue that's in there. And if that's not successful, then we're not going to be successful. And so we're very serious about taking on the right people. The underestimation piece is, hey, we can get growth for you, but are you prepared for what's going to happen?
Dude, I love where you're going with this. Keep going.
We'll be fine. Yeah. And I say, okay.
No, seriously.
We can get 2 to 3 times the sales that you're doing. Can you get that plus more from a product standpoint? Yeah, we'll be fine. And there's
the stock out happens. Oh, oops. This is a good problem to have.
Why didn't you guys alert us of this stock out? I've heard that recently. And sometimes, in the beginning, in the first year or two, there were times where I just said, you know what, we messed that up because we did not thoroughly put their feet to the fire and say, no, you really have to be able to produce more inventory, not just than what's sold, but like double, because now we know that you've doubled or tripled your sales, and we want to get further out. So you don't just have 30 days of inventory, but like 60 days of inventory on hand, whether you can store it at Amazon or not. And people are misguided about that. And then it happens. And then it's like, what happened with the stock out? And then the way that people view stock outs happening is that Amazon penalizes you. And Amazon technically doesn't ding your listing and say, oh, don't show this, they ran out of stock. But and I've heard news articles state it this way, and it's so deceitful, I think, because what ultimately happens is, it's not that Amazon dings your product, it's that when you stop selling, your product becomes less and less relevant to Amazon and the searches that people are having, because you're losing sales. And Amazon's not saying, oh, is it because of stock out, or is it because of this issue? Your product's not live anymore because you sold out. So people aren't seeing it, so people aren't purchasing it. So yeah, it does ultimately affect the product listing, but it's not like Amazon's just, as far as I know, they're not just saying, all right, screw these people. They, let's put them out of the search results because they're not selling. It's like they just don't have products. So they're not going to show up. We're not going to send people to a product page where people can't purchase something.
Makes perfect sense. And, we took a snack company from basically, zero. I think they were at 40,000 a month, and we took them into $1 million per month in December, in the course of 65 days or something crazy like that.
That's awesome.
And we had this stock conversation, and they listened, and they reaped the reward by having that supply chain in place. And so, like, that's the tale of two Amazon sellers.
Why do you think that was different? Why do you think they listened as opposed to other people?
That's a great question. Not very often someone asks me questions on my podcast. Now I got to put my thinking hat on. By the way, I'm glad you did that. I think that they were really serious, and they wanted to succeed beyond they were in it to win it, right? So, like, that mentality to understand that if something works, if something succeeds, that they have to be prepared for the avalanche that follows, right? Because, like, their world is completely different than it was 60 days ago, right? Like, and mind you, like, we had to navigate IPI, we had to navigate SKU shipping restrictions. I mean, it was a mess, but we pulled it off, and it was just a blast. And so I'm sure you've had similar experiences where you've also, like, put on the spigot and people listen to you. What do you think? I'll give you the same question. Like, what makes the difference for somebody that listens or doesn't listen, in your opinion?
I mean, this is gonna go a little bit deeper than Amazon, but I think there's a pride issue that's there. There's nothing we can't deal with, and it's not that I don't think you can or cannot deal with it. It's how do you know that this can happen, and what would you do? And a lot of people don't want to plan out what they would do. They just say we'll be able to handle it. And it's not like I'm expecting you to get this inventory prepped right now. We just need to know, hey, if you've got $20,000 of cash on hand and suddenly you need $50,000 worth of inventory, how are you going to make that happen? And getting those kinds of answers, I think, is incumbent upon the service provider. And I say that because I've done enough deals where, we don't ask all the questions that we need to ask, and something ends up going wrong. Or I've made bad deals where the cost was not in our favor at all, and the project fizzled out, or was not a good experience. And so, like you said, it's the people who take it seriously, and that is asking, like, the way you get to that from a sales perspective is asking a lot of questions and asking the same question over and over. It's almost like you take a quiz and you get some of the answers wrong, and then you take the same quiz and everything's in the same order and you saw the answers. Well, you didn't really learn the answers, did you? You just found out what the answers were, and you answered it in that order. We
do that with the pesticides test. Yeah, we gave out the answer key to the pesticides test because we thought it was so ridiculous. Oh, you sell sheets? Oh, you sell tweezers?
Yeah.
Oh, you have pesticides. Take the test.
We had a client who had a consumer electronic that was flagged as a pesticide. That got overturned really easily.
So annoying.
I mean, yeah, just very, 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 very lame. I think that's a great word for it.
And here, I think this is a great question to ask. Like, so let's say you're a listener, you've never hired an agency before, and you're, like, trying to figure out. So, like, the question you should ask that agency is, what would happen if such and such random scenario happened? Walk me through how you'd solve that. If you ask that question, you will learn a lot. So what happens if my item gets marked as a pesticide? How would you handle that? And if they say, oh, we don't handle that, well, there you go. They're not a full service agency.
Yeah. Or I think if you look at, a lot of people are focused on what Amazon specifically says. And when you've worked with Amazon enough, you know that there are either things that get left out. And I think
here's what they say. It's up here. Here's what they mean, or what they actually execute.
I mean, that's the time when you really have to read between the lines, and that just comes from experience and knowing what Amazon requests. But I think also having insight into how different departments are run. Like from what I know from people who either work at Amazon or have experience there, I've even looked at an AMA Reddit thread for a seller support or seller performance person from Amazon, and things that I've got over time is that seller performance, seller support are notoriously understaffed, and the quality, just based on the responses that you'll get, we are looking into this, we are forwarding it to the right team, thank you, we are looking into this. The people are not trained on how to problem solve. It is really meant to be a dam. It is meant to stop some things and filter through the things that are the most important, and the rest of it kind of stays back here. And I think that's an area where a lot of people are frustrated with, rightfully so, with Amazon. And I think if Amazon said, and this is something where Amazon leaves a hole open for competition. Amazon is hard to beat because they're willing to spend and spend and spend to continue to grow the business, and they want things to be at a good price, and they have super high expectations. But this same thing happened with eBay before, and it's putting more stock in what your buyers or your customers have to say than your suppliers. And it's not that your suppliers or your sellers need to be more important, but they should be as important as the buyers. There's a way to walk that line, but it comes from more skilled workers. And I believe, no discredit to the people that are on the front lines at seller support, but a lot of times that the way people are handling things is inept. They do not have a good understanding of the situation. And in my mind, they're looking at a checklist. And when you submit a plan of action, if you don't hit all those checklists in an undeniable way, they're not going to approve you because they're on the line. Or did we actually resolve this case? Is that on the line? I know that a lot of the seller support people have to get through a lot of cases. Getting cases solved and marking them as solved is a metric from my understanding. So if that's the case, you've got some potentially lethal metrics that could take out businesses and that have taken out businesses, but really should not have, because if there were even just someone that had a little bit more understanding of the system and what actually happened. Hey, I don't have any other account. We're not associated with any other business. Well, you need to figure out this other business. I don't know what account you're talking about. How am I supposed to figure this out?
That's because you're doing something fishy over there. Oh, denied. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And if you don't have any insight into what's really happening, I mean, they've made strides, and that's where something that I respect for. I brought up Ed Rosenberg a lot. Maybe I'm just trying to get a speaking spot at the next ASG. But what he does is he said Amazon.
Send him this pod.
I will. He said Amazon has come a long way, and he's right. Amazon is now giving people the first few letters of the email address and the last few letters of the email address, so that people can say, oh, this is my personal email and I don't sell anything here, or I have no idea who this is. So they're making strides. I don't think they're making strides quick enough. And where Amazon is, what I'm tying this back to them leaving an opportunity in the marketplace is the general marketplace. There's an opportunity for a company. They may not be as big as Amazon, but that can create a sustainable sales channel that respects clients as much and respects sellers as much as it respects their customers or their clients that are purchasing. And that's the one lesson that I think when people talk about something being too big to fail, I mean, we know that's not the case from the little I know about finance, but when, the banks were getting bailed out in 2008 or 2009, not too big, no one's too big to fail. And so I think that's one of the back doors, maybe even more of a side door, because more people are aware of it now that Amazon's leaving open. People know what Amazon's model is. They know how they work. So it just requires someone to come in who's open to innovation, but respects both sides of the pendulum and says, we're going to balance those two things.
All right, we're going into the next segment, which is how to grow Amazon sales. So if you could give advice for somebody who has 1 hour today, what should they do right now to grow their Amazon sales?
I think, where I tend to put weight is on the advertising piece. And many people, I would say, that especially our digitally native brands have had interactions with AdWords. And I've had some interactions with AdWords, but from what I know, you can get your results right away are pretty indicative of how they will continue to be. And you might be able to get some incremental changes like in your ROAS, or, if you turn certain things off, your ROAS will go up. But when it comes to Amazon and advertising, because of and this is the big differentiator of Amazon versus any other marketplace, any other ad platform, because that's, they are an ad platform now. There is an organic component, which is why people now talk about tacos or true ACOS, your ad spend versus your total sales. Because, and I saw this as a seller when ads first came out, I just started messing around with it. And I mean, it was like super basic. And my skill level was super basic. Like one word, dog, plate, food, like very, very basic stuff. I don't know what I was selling there with the dog plate food, but I'm sure there's a product there.
I mean, dogs would play with anything. So
yeah, so there you go. And I noticed that one of my main products was selling well in advertising, but the total sales were growing as well. And I'm like, why aren't these sales, like I turn on advertising, why aren't these sales being attributed to advertising? And when we look at things from a numbers perspective, we added a head of data last year because I do believe data is so important. And there's a story to be told. I believe that there's a story to be told in the data if you look at it correctly, but you have to know what pieces of data look at and what do certain pieces of data mean when they have this outcome or when they have this outcome. What's the next step? Just like, okay, my conversion rate sucks on my listing. Well, I need to go look at my listing. Is there great copies? Yeah, all that stuff's there. Oh, there was a big change in my reviews. My reviews went down. My rating went down. That's where the conversion rate myth was.
Your category switch. You sell an item that's a card game and they put you in sports.
And so
we solved that problem last week.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's like, yeah, I mean, it's great. There's so many examples of things.
Hidden suppressions. Yeah. So it's suppressed and you don't even know.
Right.
And the only way to find out is to type the ASIN literally into Amazon search box. And if it doesn't come up, you have a hidden suppression. Yeah. This crap drives me crazy.
Well, and there's so much going on behind the scenes that there's bound to be misses. The most unfortunate part though, is that it directly affects people's earning capabilities. It affects people's livelihoods. And I believe there's a little more weight to that than, oh, I didn't get the product that I wanted. Like this person has their store, listing suppressed because of whatever. It's not, you're not notified because there's so much volume there. And that's an example, I think, of efficiency at scale that often screws the people who are part of the inefficiencies that later are turned into efficiencies. But ultimately, I would say know what advertising does and learn to utilize it. And honestly, hire someone that can help you. And yes, I'm a service provider. You don't have to hire me.
Let's plug you though. So we're wrapping up the podcast. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
You can do three things, maybe four. One, you can email me, michael@thinkcartology.com. So if you're having a problem with Amazon, what should you do? Think Cartology. That was what's behind the URL.
I love it. Good brand, by the way.
And so you can email me there. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very vocal on LinkedIn, and I answer my DMs pretty regularly. I put out a lot of content there. You can also go to our site, thinkcartology.com, and fill out a submission form. We'll get back to you, fairly quickly. But ultimately, my goal in connecting with people is to get into a conversation with them, do a discovery call and say, what are you looking for? What is your brand about? I'm not going to promise that we're going to be the right person for you. We might have an option for you, and we have a division of our business. It's called Storybox. It's this separate, more a la carte division where we'll handle certain things. If someone doesn't quite have the cash to go full service, or that's not what they need.
Dang, that's what I should have done with my Amazon guy. I made the a la carte the same brand name. I should have separated the brands. So what a smart move, Michael.
Well, our vice president had her own, her name was Brittany McCormick, and she had her own consulting business, Storybox. And so she and I started working together 3 years ago. Let's bring these two things together and create these separate service divisions. And so that's been helpful from a lead standpoint. But if we can't help you, or I don't really believe in the product, I'm happy to send you to someone else. Or I'll even encourage you. People say, we're looking at multiple people. We're getting RFPs from, all kinds of people. And I'll say, that's great. I want you to do that. The one thing I feel that could be hard for you to find is the level of service and customization of strategy at the price point that we're offering. But I don't want anyone to feel like they have to rush in to get into an agreement with us, because that's when you have people who have missed expectations and things don't go the way they want. And then they end up leaving early, or they're dissatisfied with something. And if someone's dissatisfied with our relationship, we'll sit down at the table and say, what do we need to do better? here's what we need from you in this regard. Let's fix it. And we've done that multiple times, and it's worked, and clients have stuck around. But I don't want to rush into something because it may just not be the right fit.
Well, impossible to make everybody happy. And I think today's podcast was great on, a really inside look onto how agency owners think about it, and how a lot of times agencies can let people down and what to do about it. And so great conversations today, Michael. Thanks so much for coming on the My Amazon Guy podcast.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be here, and I look forward to part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5.
For sure. This will not be the last conversation. All right. Well, stay tuned, guys. Thanks so much. This was the My Amazon Guy podcast with Stephen Pope. Each episode helps you grow your sales on Amazon through ideas on traffic and conversion rate improvements. Hit that subscribe button right now to tune in each week. And if you need more help, go to myamazonguy.com.